or by Alfa Romeo. Who thinks it's a Bentley? It's not a Bentley. Great, so we have passed the walk down, and now we're going to take a trolley. Should be a little different and smoother, or accelerated. We're supposed to be getting some tour information on the way. This is all the parking spots for those wanting to walk on the bridge. I think we're waiting for people to clear up. He's going to open the gate to allow the trolley through. Mild delay. And away we go. Some historical information coming your way for the 7 Mile Bridge and Pigeon Key. Oh, he's going to put his post back on the ground so people can't drive on the bridge.
Flip-flop repair shop.
Absolutely.
I like that. Don't step on a pop top.
If you do, we'll get it fixed for you.
As we head out to the historic train bridge towards Pigeon Key, on my right, we're here on the Gulf of Florida. There are small islands out in the distance, a lot of handing off to my right. These are part of the largest bird sanctuary in North America. It's called the Great Heron National Wildlife Sanctuary. It goes all the way from Key West to the mainland, all over on the Gulf side. And these little islands are where all seabirds build their nests, raise their little chicks safely, way out there. You are all invited and welcome to go visit any of the islands out here. There are hundreds of them between here and the mainland. You'll need a very shallow draft boat. The smallest boat you can get your hands on would be the very best. Very interesting part of the Total Keys experience. Get yourself out onto a boat. Doing anything at all. If wildlife sanctuary, it is really full of wildlife, love the service.
They just off in the distance are all the hundreds of islands that are bird sanctuary area. So we just put our little post back to prevent more cars from coming through, and now we're off for a trolley ride down the 7 Mile Bridge. Did I say Oscar? Hello, Oscar. Welcome. Thanks for joining us here on this trolley tour we're going to do on 7 Mile Bridge at the Pigeon Key. Yeah, they try to reproduce train horn. This bridge was originally, hello, This was originally a train bridge by Henry Flagler with Florida East Coast Railway. His dream to get a railroad down to Key West. In 1925 or 35, somewhere in there, a hurricane wiped it out. And the government took it over and made a highway out of it. And in the 80s, they built a new one. Just a distance there, you got a great restaurant, Sunset Grill. Can't really see it with your eyes here, but we were talking about all the bird sanctuaries and hundreds and hundreds of islands just off the main road here. About a 2-mile ride. Great exercise path. Guess they're gonna honk each time they pass some people. Oh, he just wants to honk the horn. Oh, there he is.
My beer.
Can't quite see it, but the people fishing down below in their boats. Got a almost sandbar. I feel like the honking, huh? Tries to get that authentic train ride feel. Great fishing here for tarpon, grouper under the bridge. We've seen stingrays jumping out of the water here. Get some sharks. It's definitely a more efficient way of doing this than walking. Yeah, this bridge would have been completed back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They actually were building this bridge 4 ways at one time. We're going to what's called Pigeon Key, which was their home base. Then you had an island on both sides. The weather, I think we're seeing 80, 81 degrees. For some reason, it's not, I guess we're going with the wind, so I don't feel it. I want to say we got pretty windy conditions. See if you can see the wake caps on the waves. So it's a little breezy, causing the waves to be big enough to crash over themselves. So fairly comfortable weather. If you get out in the sun directly, it gets a little hot just from the direct sun. Got some lighthouses out there. I don't know if you can see it or not. There it is. A little gray. Back in line here. There it is. He's passing through, but along that line is reefs. Got a line of coral reefs for our barrier reef. Goes from almost Miami Beach all the way down to Key West and beyond. Doing their family outings today. That's going to be a little more windy on the way back for us. And by chance, we got good seats. We literally pulled up as they're ready to pull out of the parking lot. Unexpected weather. Or not weather, unexpected traffic. We'll watch the next mile marker on the ground. See where we're at. 1.1 miles. So we got 0.9 miles to go. We get this little historical island. They do a lot of summer camp programs and junior scientists, junior marine biologists. And we're definitely going with the wind, so 10, 15 mile an hour winds. I think we finally got this stabilizer worked out on the camera. Let me know if you all see a difference in the quality of the image. See all it's a cool looking color, but it's kind of a milkyish color because the wind's so strong it's stirring up the sand. When it's a calm day, the water is much more clear. The brown patches are very shallow, like sandbars. People already made it down and making their way back. But for us to get down here to do that, we gotta leave even earlier in the morning, and that just wasn't an option. We got a half mile to go. Let's see our destination just ahead. It was home base for the bridge building crews. So they're able to start the bridge on the two main islands at once, as well as both directions from the center island. We are hoping for a snack station or drink station there because we were a little rushed. More traffic than the GPS was expecting. And we are now arriving at Pigeon Key. These are mostly original homes. We'll find out how accurate that is. Sometimes on our way back from Key West at nighttime, you can see the campfires they have going on out here. What I understand, if you just walk down the 2 miles of bridge, and you just keep walking down the bridge. That's where they took out sections so nobody could ever go down there again. This was a fully operational US 1 to Key West. And I think it was True Lies that was filming the car crash. Arnold drove a car through an explosion off a bridge. A lot of makeshift wood shacks. So if you walk down, this is where you would check in, pay your little admission fee. It used to be a ferry that would come over. Waiting to be released. He's other than
Back of the train. Leah will meet you there.
Welcome, everybody. Come on over here. I'm going to gather you all over here and give you a little heads up on what's your availabilities here, or opportunities here, I should say, on the island. So welcome.
what a great job.
You too. Thank you. Have a great rest of your vacation. Hey, yes. You're welcome.
Spend your days on this great little island.
All right, come on over, guys. Welcome to Pigeon Key. Beautiful day. Okay, good. So my name is Leah. I offer a 30 to 35-minute tour of the island. We sit down here, I talk for a bit, then we kind of infiltrate in the island, go into these buildings. I talk to you about the history and such. But just a few housekeeping things. Our restrooms are in this building. Okay, over to the left of the building. On the left-hand entrance is our water fountain, so just be mindful of keeping hydrated and things like that. If you continue to walk down this road is where our gift shop is. We have waters, sodas, ice creams there, Pigeon Key, merchandise and things like that, all right? The building that I'm pointing to you this way in the middle, that is where our museum is. Okay, a very interesting museum related to the Pigeon Key history. I end the tour there. And beyond that shoreline is where we have our guests swim, snorkel, or fish if you want to do that, all right? Now at 2:15, we do a fish feeding. I have a tub of fish, scrap fish. We have a couple of nurse sharks in here, some Jack Crevalles, several other native fish, and it's fun to anybody can toss food in there, and we see them feasting on these little pieces of fish, okay? But I'd love you to join me for the tour. You don't have to take the tour. You can do a self-guided tour if you want. We have a brochure that the ramp attendant can give you, and I don't mind if you come in and out of the tour. It doesn't bother me a bit, okay? But anyway, we're going to start over here. Just be careful. There's some uneven ground on the way over to the chairs, all right? But come on over and make yourself comfortable.
So yes, beautiful day out here. 80 degrees. Quite breezy. Partly cloudy. Near perfect Florida Keys day. I got some samples of some artificial reefs. They were making stuff like this to pile up on the ocean floor to help rebuild the reefs. No fishing or swimming in the shark pool. He's pretty cool.
So once again, my name is Leah. I lived here in Marathon about 5 years ago or so. My husband and I decided to take the big leap and buy a little place. Luckily, home prices were a little bit less expensive back then, but we've been enjoying our winters here ever since. I walked the old 7 mile for recreation just about every day, and said, I wonder if they'll give me a little job down here. Well, they gave me a job down here, that's for sure. But anyway, so welcome. So we have guests from Florida. Where are our Floridians? Anybody? What part of Florida? Okay, Miami. Love Miami. Welcome. Anybody else? Palm Beach. Did I talk about Miami a lot? I talk about Palm Beach. Okay. Where else are our visitors from? Any cold areas of the country? San Diego. Oh, Ireland. Well, welcome. Welcome. San Diego. Not too cold down there, but I love San Diego. Beautiful. Well, anyway, welcome. Even if you're not from Florida, I am sure that you have heard of Flagler County, Flagler Beach, Flagler Avenue, Flagler Boulevard. Everything is Henry Flagler, okay? Henry Flagler is quite a bit of him today. That's Edgar. So anyway, Henry Flagler was born in 1830, the son of a poor Presbyterian minister in upstate New York somewhere. When he was 14, he moved to right outside of Cleveland, Ohio, to work at his uncle's general store that was also attached to a grain brokerage business. And Henry found at a very early age that he was very skillful and really enjoyed buying, selling the commodity of grain, right? And he became very successful at a young age. He saved $50,000, which maybe translates to $1 million in our time, in our money these days. So did very well. He decided to invest his money in a salt mine outside of Saginaw, Michigan. Now, this was a time when the Civil War was happening, and salt was being used to preserve food being sent to the troops. So he wanted to cash in on that need for salt. Bought the business, started doing well, but unfortunately for Henry, the Civil War ended. His business went belly up. He found himself broke and in debt. He goes back to Ohio to work once again in the grain brokerage industry, starting from the ground up. Now, while he was there the second time around, he ran into a familiar rival. All right. Now, this rival friend and Henry thought of each other as geniuses and visionaries. They knew each other quite well from the first time they worked together. And this fella says to Henry, Henry, I'm starting a new business. I'm starting a brand new venture from the ground up. I want you to come along with me. Henry says, well, I don't really have that much money. I'm pretty broke. I lost my business. He says, that doesn't matter. I want you with me, all right? That man turned out to be John D. Rockefeller, and the business was Standard Oil, all right? So for the next 10 to 15 years, Henry and John start making money hand over fist in the oil business. They bought all the little refineries all throughout the country, all the independent oil firms they bought, and they became huge, multi-millionaires living in Manhattan on Fifth Avenue on adjoining mansions. And they walked back and forth to work, brainstorming, scheming. How can we get more? How can we build our business? How can we just get more wealth? Now, at that time, our government had kind of a laissez-faire approach to businesses. We had just gotten out of the Civil War. Our infrastructure was poor. Our economy was poor. And they encouraged big businesses to make as much money as you can to pump into the economy. However, like these days, maybe you have heard this term, the rich started getting richer, the poor started getting poorer, and now the government had kind of an about-face reaction and started instilling anti-trade laws, anti-monopoly laws. A Sherman Act was devised to break these big companies up and apart, and Henry didn't like it. He says, I built my businesses from the ground up. I'm tired of being dragged into court. I'm tired of having my business being looked at under a microscope constantly. So he steps down from Standard Oil, all right? But the wise man that he is, he kept 30% of the stock. He remained on the board of directors, and he collected dividends from those stocks for the rest of his life. Still an extremely wealthy man in New York City, Gilded Age, okay? So the next chapter in his life is his wife became quite severely ill. She developed a respiratory infection, and her physician suggested that Henry take her to a warmer climate. He said, get her out of this cold, damp New York City air, bring her to someplace warm. So they go to Jacksonville, Florida. Now, no offense to anybody who lives in Jacksonville or has any relatives or any kind, but it was really pretty much a dump down there, okay? Florida was isolated, not a lot of travel. People didn't have any way of getting down there, okay? It just wasn't developed. And in our timeline, it was only a state for 30 years by then, okay? This is around 1870 or something like that. So anyway, he brings them down to Jacksonville, and they didn't really like it. There was no accommodations for people of their wealth and stature, okay? They stood out like a sore thumb amongst the folk of Florida, all right? They were used to butlers and maids and golden crusted fixtures in their mansions and things like this, and there was nothing to accommodate them, all right? So they went back up to New York, and she dies around 6 years later. And Henry remarries. He remarries his wife's nurse. Okay, so he and the caretaker were getting a little cozy there while his wife was sick. Anyway, that's another story. He's got a new wife, and this woman says, Henry, I'd like to go down to Florida. thought it was worth it to stay and invest. All right. So if there's no accommodations for him or his people, and who are his people? His people were the wealthy from New York, Philadelphia, Boston, Newport, Rhode Island. He made accommodations for them. He built a grand hotel resort called the Ponce de Leon.
Goes the train.
And the Ponce de Leon is still there today. It's Flagler College. And if you want to get a feeling of what kind of wealth we're talking about with the Flaglers and the kind of hotel that he built for his friends, it's just magnificent with lush gardens and fixtures from Europe and all kinds of things. And the college kids today are eating their nachos under 73 pristine Tiffany glass windows. Okay? They just don't really have a clue of the grandeur of the Gilded Age. Anyway, so he's got his hotel, built himself a nice little pool next to it, and he's looking out the window over St. Augustine one day, and he's seeing streets being developed and other hotels that he's built, stores, people, population, because now the wealthy from the East Coast states, eastern states, have a place to come to and enjoy. All right. And another thing that I read, obviously I've done a lot of reading of this, but is that Henry Flagler, when he got down to Florida, kind of went through a spiritualization. No longer was he interested in the persona of a staunch Ebenezer Scrooge type businessman who wanted more and more, pencil pushing behind a mahogany desk. He wanted to move away from being an accumulator of wealth to one that provides. He wanted to use his wealth to provide a place down in Florida for his people. Okay, so now he has to devise a way to get them down there. So he starts.
Hey, Messi. We
We
are Pigeon Key, getting a tour.
And then they all started coming to St. Augustine, right? The oldest city in Florida. So then he's doing well, enjoying himself with his new venture, and he had some friends that were visiting St. Augustine, and they went yachting down further south because they were wealthy. They come back up to Henry Flagler. They sit down with Henry and they say, Henry, we have found the garden. If you think St. Augustine area is nice, you should check out further down south.
This is my first time actually on the island. Some really good information and definitely a beautiful place.
Brings his railroad down. He builds his second flagship hotel in West Palm Beach called the Royal Ponciana. Now the Royal Ponciana was so huge that it had over 1,000 rooms, 300 waiters serviced the dining room, and the bellhops had to ride bicycles up and down the corridors to get to the guest rooms. Huge wooden structure, okay? He built a few more flagship hotels, and people started to come down there. So now he's got a little American Riviera, and that's what they called it, between St. Augustine and West Palm Beach. Daytona Beach pops up, Palm Beach pops up, Flagler Beach, Ormond Beach, all start popping up.
Don't be too jealous. Set a plan and find a way to get there.
So, Henry's looking pretty good. Built himself another little home.
Use it as inspiration.
Whitehall is in West Palm Beach. Beautiful marble building. That was his home, okay? And so he lives there. He has his new business called the FEC, the Florida East Coast Railroad. All right, so things are looking pretty good on the American Riviera. But now he's thinking beyond that. Okay, he's seeing what's behind him in Central Florida, and he sees acres and acres of citrus groves. And he also knows that mangoes grow down here, papaya, sugarcane, pineapple, and now he's thinking trade. Always interested, he likes that trade business. He's thinking, not only can I bring tourists down here, but I can use my railroad as a little commodity, a trade route to bring all this luscious fruit up to the eastern cities and provide them with this type of thing because they really can't get it. Now, when you think the people in New York City had probably never held a pineapple, they probably never peeled an orange because by the time that luscious produce had been shipped by steamship up to the eastern cities, the fruit would go bad. All right, so now he's got this trade route, he's got his tourism business and things like that. The next chapter in the story, there was a woman by the name of Julia Tuttle. Now, Julia Tuttle was a bulldog of a woman, and she was a woman of wealth. She had some money, and she lived even further down South Florida, where there was nothing.
Mosquitoes.
and swamps. We're talking Everglades, all right? So she's down in her little area. Her father had left her a few thousand acres in a little area called Fort Dallas. Fort Dallas was a small little remnants of an old Seminole Indian war camp, okay? So nothing but the scrubs, nothing there, all right? She knew what was going up on the East Coast, and so she wanted that for her area. So she would telegram Flagler once a month, then twice a month, 3 times a month, begging him, telling him, Mr. Flagler, you don't know me, but I know you, and I want you. I need you to bring your train down to Fort Dallas so that we can enjoy the prosperity and the economy that the eastern cities are enjoying. All right. So Flagler knows what's down here. He heard, people have been traveling the coast of Florida on boats and stuff like that. He had no interest in it. He says, I've got my mansion here, I've got my trade business, I've got my hotel business. This woman. But Tuttle was so persistent that finally Flagler sent a group of his advisors down to Fort Dallas and said, come report back to me. They came back. They sat down with Flagler. They said, Mr. Flagler, once again, we heard, if you think West Palm Beach is nice, you should check out what's even further down Florida. Okay. Now, remember, the peninsula of Florida is very large, it's very long, and the climate differences are vast. For instance, this winter they had snow up in northern Florida, where we continue to enjoy beautiful weather like this all year round. All right. So, this is a story. I read it in one source. Okay. I don't know if it's a true story. It's kind of a nice little story, and you can believe it if you want. Okay. He gets his wife and he gets another team of advisors, and they get into an ox-driven cart, a carriage, and they're going down a trail, a path, not even a road, down to Fort Dallas, over sun-baked, rutted, terrain. Okay, they arrive at Fort Dallas. They step out of the carriage. A balmy breeze hits them in the face, kind of like the breeze we're feeling today. All right, the palm trees are flowing in the wind, and the sand is just like sugar. All right. So they look at each other and they say, it might be difficult with this terrain, but let's bring our railroad down there. So they bring the railroad as far down as Fort Dallas. Okay. And he builds his next flagship hotel called the Royal Palms. Unfortunately, no longer there. But anyway, the people of Fort Dallas were so excited and so thrilled that the railroad was down there. Their city started to emerge, and they said to Flagler, Mr. Flagler, what can we do? How can we show our appreciation and our gratitude for bringing the train down here? Can we name our new little city Flaglerville or Flaglertown? He says, you don't need to do that. Why don't you just simply name your new town after this lovely meandering river that's going right through it that was named after American Indian tribes centuries ago? The city of, who has an idea what it is now? The city of Miami. The city of Miami was born. Okay, so out of a population 168 people when it was Fort Dallas, it grew to what it is today in just over a short decade. And Flagler poured his money into Miami. Why? The climate. The climate. He knew that people from the east, this is the final destination to get to a warm, sunny climate. All right, and he built paved roads, streetlights, sidewalks, libraries, hospitals, more hotels, more businesses to what we have today in Miami. Okay, so Henry Flagler now has got his trade business going all the way down to Miami. He's got a population, the American Riviera, all up and down the east coast of Florida. Henry's happy, but he's not content. And the reason he's not content completely is because he knows what else is down there, Key West. All right, so he's got his eye on Key West now. Now, Key West at that time was a populated city, believe it or not, maybe you know this, maybe you don't, full of millionaires and mansions in the 1800s. Does anybody know how
Shipwrecking.
Little Rock, Key West, isolated from the rest of the country, how it made its money, how it got so rich in the 1800s?
Shipwrecks.
Yes, shipwrecking industry and the salvaging industry. The island chain of the Florida Keys is surrounded by extremely shallow water. So these massive sail ships from Spain, sails billowing in the wind, would travel down the Pacific through the Caribbean, collecting timber and textiles, jewels, gold, silver, to trade up in this area. And and then they'd reach the Florida Straits, they'd run aground. All right. So you had shipwrecks, maybe 2 or 3 a month, at least. All right. So the men from Key West would stand on
That's
tall
a lot of
towers,
shipwrecks.
livid glass, wreck ashore, wreck ashore. Okay. They see these massive ships stuck on the bottom of the ocean. Okay. So they row out there in their fast little boats with a single sail. They order the captain,
Appreciate
the
that.
crew, and all the merchandise back with them to Key West, where they would either auction it off or sell it back to the original merchant. And they made millions doing this. Okay. And they invested in the Cuban cigar industry. They invested in turtling, sponging, and they were scoundrels. They would make it look like an area was
Several a month,
somehow for the
2 to
ships
3 a
to come
month.
to come through, and they'd run them up on the reefs. Okay, so they were smart. But anyway, if you ever get to the U.S., I'm sure you have or are going to or have been, the shipwreck museum is really an interesting museum.
It is a great museum. Very simple but amazing.
So anyway, Flagler knows this. He knows the wealth that's down in the U.S. He says, I want to bring my railroad down. All right. So now he was challenged in finding a team of professionals, surveyors, engineers, who would come aboard with him and tackle this problem. And all up and down the East Coast, it was being known that Flagler, oil tycoon, now wants to build bridges over open water across the sea. It had never been done. It had never been fathomed of being done in the world at that time. Okay, and they dubbed his plan as Flagler's Follies. They laughed at him. The headlines all in the eastern newspapers.
It
Henry
basically says
Flagler,
impossible
oil
to do.
tycoon, Flagler's Follies. Okay, that made him even more determined. So he gets his team together. He sits down. He says, "Well, boys, can we do it?" Now they knew what the challenge was. They surveyed the area. They knew. They said, Flagler, I don't know, this or that, and they hemmed and hawed and they hesitated. And they said, well, maybe we could do it, Mr. Flagler, but the cost of he shouted, he interrupted, he was angry. He said, did I ask you about the cost? I did not ask you the cost. I asked you, had it be done? So finally, they were convinced that they could do it. That was the year 1905. So between the years of 1905 and 1912, the Key West extension of the Florida East Coast Railroad had begun its construction. And it took 7 years, only 7 years, to go all the way from Homestead, because down through that area that they called 7-mile stretch, or 17-mile stretch, over the Everglades, was a
About 130-mile
so the
trip.
extension literally went from Homestead all the way down to Key West, 7 years. I think that's amazing. By the time
Back in the 1800s too.
they were tasked with the last 2 legs of the project. The first leg being this vast 7-mile expanse of open water. The second challenge was the deep water of the Bahia Honda Channel over there. Okay, so 4 years, Pigeon Key was used as a work camp to house the workers who worked on these last 2 projects of the extension. Okay, so there were up to 400 men who didn't live on this island, but they slept and they ate on this island. Okay, so that's kind of where Pigeon Key starts to get its history. Work camp between those 4 years before the railroad opened in 1912. Anybody have any questions? Okay, if you want to continue to join me, I'm going to talk for a few minutes in front of this building. It's called the section gang. Now, section gang is just simply railroad talk for barracks. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit in front of the section gang, go into that building, and then go continue to look at some other buildings and the bridge. Oh, there's that. Oh, and if I had
I appreciate you joining in. We'll catch you next time. And you definitely catch this on the replays. Cannot imagine 400 people basically living on this island. That is Edgar, our resident great egret. He definitely knows it's time to eat soon. Hopefully Mezzi's gonna have a good time playing Forza. We'll continue our tour here.
Okay, so this is the section gang. It is considered a original That's damaged buildings. Okay, so in an essence, it is original because there's a lot of the bare bones of the building are original. It has been fixed up and refurbished. Okay, there were four section games just like this all in a row that housed 64 men, two rows of bunk beds, 64 men. The rest of the acreage behind me was a tent city. Okay, canvas tents that sat on wooden platforms, 10 men per tent. All right. There was also one building that housed the FEC managers. There was an original kitchen and cookhouse that we will walk by that is considered one of the two original buildings. And then this entire coastline here on this side of the island, a huge, massive warehouse to store cement and other dried materials. Okay. So Pigeon Key, besides having people like you come and enjoy the island and learn about the island for the afternoon, is used as a marine science camp for the youth. So young kids, elementary school kids, high school kids will come with their teachers and chaperones, stay here on the island for a few nights and learn about marine science at a very early age. Okay? So come on up. There happens to be no students here at this time, but we're going to go inside the building.
Just for update, we do live in Florida. My name is Mike, and we just did a day trip here to Pigeon Key, which is about halfway down the Florida Keys. Let's see, hopefully we can keep signal inside this little building. 65 people would have been bunking up in here.
Okay, so just imagine way back then, 2 rows of bunk beds, 64 men in each section wing, all right? The flooring material is called a material called Dade County pine. It's a native pine tree that grows here in Florida. It's a very slow-growing pine tree with soft wood. However, when the sap and the resin cures, it becomes so durable and so hard that you can barely hammer a nail into it, and it's resistant of termites. So you'll see a lot of original homes in Florida with this type of flooring. Okay. These track buoys here, as they wash up on the shore, the students who go to the camp here are able to collect them, put the name of their school on it, and all sign the buoy and put the date of when they were here on Pigeon Key for the marine science camp. So that's what this is all about. But this building was also equipped with a unique style of windows called pocket windows. When the storms and gales would come through, they just rip these windows open and the air could just go right through them. All right. Also, this was another source of ventilation. They called it comfort conditioning. Right. There was no AC, but it did allow a breeze to come through. Every few feet, you'll see a steel rod like this. The roof is attached to this rod, which is attached to the cap rock in the island. Okay, so it has worked all these years. None of these buildings has ever lost a roof entirely. Maybe some pieces or portions have been damaged, but it's never flown off like you see hurricane damage today. The working conditions were rough. It was hot. It was isolated out here. The men worked 10-hour days, 6 days a week. All right, and it was not an easy job. All right. And two questions that were posed to Henry Flagler when he started this project was, first of all, Henry, where are you going to get the fresh water? There's no fresh water in the Keys now. There wasn't then. All right. Another question was asked, Henry, where are you going to get the men? Who's going to come and build these bridges with you? The men in Key West are gainfully employed with the wrecking industry. They're not going to stop their jobs and come work with you. Okay. So the water situation was handled this way: huge flat bedded barges, great big cypress tanks of water would come through. And then as the railroad was developed, it would come through on flatbed rail cars, all right? So from the aquifers underneath the areas of Homestead and Biscayne, you had fresh water aquifers. 5,400,000 gallons of fresh water a month were shipped out here for this project. Now, what about the men? The men, Henry Flagler's railroad company, the FEC, was headquarters in New York City. So he hired recruiting teams, all right, who would go along in areas like the Bowery of New York City and areas like that in Philadelphia. Now, the Bowery of New York City was occupied by downtrodden men, alcoholic men, homeless men, all right? But these recruiters would post bills, and it said, come work in Florida, $1.25 a day. Now, these men were used to making 10 cents a day, all right? And the bill posted also said accommodations provided, like this, right? And transportation provided. So he called these groups of workers the BOs, the hobos, okay? So we had the hobos coming down here to work. He also employed men from the Cayman Islands, the Bahamas, the Mediterranean areas of Europe, because they were used to the climate. So they were very, very successful workers, all righty? Another thing that I like to ask my groups is, if you think of a couple of things that would completely bring morale so low that these men would go nuts and almost want to swim to the mainland. Can you think of some working conditions? Mosquitoes. What? Nothing? I said it. I thought you were going to say mosquitoes. Mosquitoes were so thick down here that the men would put kerosene and diesel fuel on their skin to repel the mosquitoes, and it really didn't work, all right? Not so much on Pigeon Key because we had a nice cross street, but out in the peripheries, in the mangroves, just horrible working conditions. The other thing that is kind of a fun thing to talk about, no alcohol, all right? In all of Henry Flagler's work camps, he would not allow alcohol at all. First of all, his Christian background, he didn't believe in alcohol consumption. He was a prohibitionist, okay? And so what would happen is Boot Key, which is presently an uninhabited island right off of Marathon. There's scoundrels over there, and they'd come around Pigeon Key, and they would infiltrate the shores with their booze barges, all right? And they try to sell their alcohol to the workers. And Henry Flagler said to his foreman, if you see these people coming in, you take a lit stick of dynamite, you throw it at them to keep them out, okay? But as the years went on here, the 4 years they were working here, they did find their way over to Boot Key. Prostitution was offered over there, taverns and all kinds of shenanigans going over there. But Henry had invested in these men. He wanted his project to run smoothly because he knew that the Panama Canal was being built at the same time that his extension was being built. And he knew that for months at a time, weeks, months, even years, that project had to be shut down because of disease, sickness, and death. And he did not want this happening to his project. And it didn't. It really ran pretty smoothly. All right? Over the years, the 7 years that they worked on the extension, approximately 40,000 men were on the payroll. Not all at the same time, but 40,000 men worked on this Key West extension. Okay? Any questions? Okay, we're going to continue this way.
All the buoys that wash up on the shore. See where our next point of interest is going to be. Gift shop.
For my tour people to gather right around here. Okay, so just to recap, the construction years here on Pigeon Key from 1908 to 1912, 4 years. Then 1912 comes and the railroad is starting and it's traveling over the rails all the way to Key West. And during those years, we're talking about 1912 to 1935, Pigeon Key is now a maintenance used for maintenance. The FEC employees are coming here to live and to work. Now, sadly, it hurts my heart to say this, but the railroad only ran for 23 years, if you can believe it, okay? It's sad because I think about the money and the effort and the labor and all the details put into this huge project, 23 years. There's reasons for that I'll talk about in just a few minutes. But anyway, so now, those 23 years, maintenance workers that are employed by the FEC would come to Pigeon Key, live here, and bring their families. For instance, this building right here that says Paint Foreman's House, painters had to come and work here. They would start end of that bridge to the next for circuit for 23 years, doing nothing but painting. Why? Salt air, salt water, corrodes steel. All right. Another task that had to be done was bridge tending. Now on the old 7 Mile, if you've driven by boat or car or whatever, you might have noticed a huge gap in the bridge. That is where a extraordinarily huge swing bridge would turn. All right, and the bridge attenders had to tend that daily, 24 hours a day, to allow tall mast ships to pass underneath the bridge. Okay, so those types of workers came and lived on the island, and there was a population of families that were employed by the FEC for the 23 years, and they had a nice little community to live in, I think, anyway. This building right here is presently our gift shop. It's had a number of uses over the years. A little post office for for residents here. A chapel at one time. A general store at one time. Okay. This building right here that I had mentioned to you during the construction years was the kitchen and the pantry. All right. Presently, it is still a kitchen in there, and our students that come for the marine science camp will use that as their kitchen, and we also house functions here. Now this building right here, believe it or not, 20 kids can sleep in that house. All right, they just bunk beds from top to bottom. Yeah, so they come and enjoy that. Okay, we're gonna keep walking, and I'll tell you about this little honeymoon cottage here. This little building is called the Honeymoon Cottage. And in the 50s, a family was living here. They raised their daughter here. She got married here on Pigeon Key. She honeymooned in that little cottage. All right, it's a darling little place. And presently, one of our managers lives in that cottage year round. We're going to take a look at the bridge itself. This building right here on our right is one of the oldest buildings on the Keys. Okay, you can tell it's an original building because you can see those steel rods that hold the roof on that go all the way down into the cat box. Okay, now I want to take a look at the bridge itself. You see the blue steel girders that are sitting directly on the pillars. Okay, that is where the railroad traveled across. There was no overhang. There was no railings at all. So the passengers on the train can look over across the ocean on either sides of the train and just see that beautiful azure sea. All right. The train only traveled 15 to 25 slow, luxurious miles an hour. Okay. So they really, I read that the passengers said it was like riding on a cloud across the ocean. All right. Just a beautiful ride. So we got our little trade route going. We got bringing people down to Key West, and then happened in 1929. The stock market crashes. The Great Depression sets in, and the FEC starts to limp along. It's losing money. People just don't have the means and the funds for luxury travel anymore. The days of glorious and grand ships like the Titanic starting to dwindle. Privatized personal elaborate railroad cars are starting to diminish for travel, and now the FEC is feeling it. They're starting to limp along. Another thing that's happening at that time, which kind of hurts my heart, is that Flagler's dream of a major trade route from Key West all the way up never comes to fruition. And one of the main reasons is the Navy down there in Key West would not allow the FEC to dig deep water ports to bring ships in and unload their cargo onto his rail cars. All right. They said, they probably didn't even say Mr. Flagler. They probably said, Flagler, we're not building you these ports because our job as the military is to police the area for foreign ships and to keep the country safe, not to be trying to organize your ships in for trade. Okay. So it never happened. We lost money that way. Okay. So we have the Depression. We have the no trade route. Then the nail in the coffin, the 1935 catastrophic Category 5 hurricane passes over the Keys on Labor Day. The eye goes right over Isla Morada and knocks off 44 miles of track off the bed. So at that point, the FEC said, we're done here. We've got a dinosaur of a project. You know, automobiles are starting to emerge. We just can't do it anymore. All right. Now, interesting enough, not a single bridge, not this one in front of you, or any of the smaller bridges on the route to Key West was scathed at all. The damage happened on the land, across land. Okay. So now we have the years of 1935 to 1938. The Overseas Railroad is being converted to the Overseas Highway. All right. So on this bridge, for instance, well, first of all, do you see the brown rusty guardrails up there on the side of the road? All right. Those are the original rails. They took the train rails from off the bed and placed them alongside the road and had a guardrail there. Okay. Then what they did is they simply took I-beams across the blue girders, placed support beams. They placed a steel beds between the I-beams, and then paved over. And you have a 22-foot wide highway. Now, that's barely 10 feet per lane. Granted, cars were smaller back there, but you still had Greyhound buses and delivery trucks going back and forth. And they called this the Bridge of Mirrors, because if you were lucky enough to pass another vehicle and maintain your side view mirror without it getting whacked off by the oncoming car, you're a pretty skilled driver. Now, on a personal note, where I live in Marathon, on a dear friend of mine, her father was the driver ed teacher for Marathon High School during the highway years. Okay, and he told his students, as your final exam, if you can go to and fro on the 7-mile bridge, and I don't have to put my brake on as the instructor, and you come back to school with your rear view mirror intact, you pass your exam. That's it. So the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and part of the 80s, Pigeon Key is now being overseen by the Overseas Toll Authority, because there was 2 tolls, one in Big Pine and one in Lower Matacumbe. It was used as a rest area. All right, and these buildings were occupied by state workers, state maintenance workers that worked for the toll authority governed by the state. All right, so now you had a beautiful rest area that you could drive your car down, park your car. While you were here resting, you could rent a skiff and go fishing out on the ocean. You can rent a cabin and stay for a few days. There was a fishing club that would take you out, and you and your party out fishing. And there was a tap room and a restaurant too. So Pigeon Key was voted um, the most beautiful rest area in the entire country for 17 years in a row. Right? So there's some other interesting things about Pigeon Key. 1931 was happening. Pearl Harbor gets attacked. The military comes and kicks everybody off the island. They take control of the island because it's a strategic area that it's in. But one good thing that the military did is finally they put a fresh water line that ran all the way from one end of the Keys to the next, with a water line maybe this wide, not much, but it wasn't until the 40s that the Keys got fresh water. All right, and they say if you flush the toilet in Key West, you lost your pressure here in Marathon. And I've had some guests who said, yes, it's true. You'd be taking a shower, and all of a sudden, the water pressure would just, start to trickle down. All right. So other things that the island was used for, it was leased out to the University of Miami as a satellite campus for their marine biology curriculum. It was used by people like Arnold Schwarzenegger to film his movie True Lies, that famous chase scene out on the old 7-mile bridge. And in fact, Arnold Schwarzenegger wanted to buy the island as a private island. Other businessmen wanted to buy it and develop it with condos. So finally, some very smart people from Monroe County said, let's turn Pigeon Key into a National Historic Space. And that's where we sit today. We're a private island. We're governed by a foundation and a nonprofit. So that's a very good decision. Okay, I have a few more concluding things to say up into the museum, and then the rest of the time is yours, and we'll do a meeting down at the front. Thank you.
Some of the laboratories inspection areas for the kids on their science projects when they're here for summer camps. Some sea grapes. The assistant bridge tender's house, 1912. Amazing that building technology back then holds up forever.
Wait, a few more people to pack in. Original floor, just like the date down in mind. How many times? There's still some people behind you. There we go. Okay, so here's our guy. All right, here's Henry Flack. To me, he looks the cross between the Sam Elliott and the Monopoly Man, I think. But anyway, if I hadn't mentioned to you, Henry Flagler was 75 years old when he took on the extension project. He was an older man, okay? Now, life expectancy for men back then was maybe 50, 60, 75 years old when he came up with this cockamamie idea, all right? Now, his chief engineering staff had one goal by the year 1910, 1911. They said, we got to get the old man down to Key West on the very first train before he meets the Grim Reaper, okay? So they wanted him to be alive to do that. So the date was January 22nd, 1912, and Flagler makes it down to Key West on the very first train, okay? So there was 10,000 people there to greet him. Dignitaries from Europe, from Cuba, from the United States. Because remember, nobody thought that this could ever be done. And it was done in 7 years, okay? So this postcard is available in the gift shop, and also there's a larger picture of it. There's Henry, little old man. He was blind and physically frail, all right? But he made it down there. So he steps out on the podium, and there was a 60-piece brass band, and children from schools all in the peninsula of Florida had been taught a little song, you know, Henry Flagler and his railroad. He heard them singing that to him as he stepped out, and he turns to his chief engineer and he says, well, I can't see the children, but it sounds like they're having a nice time. So anyway, he had a speech. He said, for you, I am forever grateful. I would not have been able to complete this task without your support. And his actual words were, I can now die a happy man because my dream has been realized. Okay, so he did die. He died 14 months later. He fell down the stairs at his little white mansion in West Palm Beach, Whitehall. He broke his hip and never recouped. Okay, but he got down there. So this picture right here, 1909 Pigeon Key. All right, here is the section gang that we were in, all right? And then the 3 identical section gangs, all right? I'm gonna just step kind of in front of you here.
No, you're good.
And here's the, you can step back, you're good.
Yeah.
And here is the tent city that I spoke about, all right? And I had a feeling that as population grew, as the project expanded, they were all the way out here, these tents, all right? Here's the original kitchen that we walked by. 4 cast iron stoves with their smokestacks were going continually 24 hours a day. This picture, I think is awesome, happens to catch a 4-masted scooter going by. Now, when you think this was really the only mode of transportation that we had at that time, getting down there, all right? And the foliage, the beautiful landscaping that you see didn't happen until the 50s when the Overseas Toll Authority took over and did those beautiful plantings. Here is 1 out of 4 outhouses with a gangplank that led up to the outhouse. And can you imagine at 4 or 5 in the morning, 400 men trudging up the gangplank, dropping their drawers, squatting, and going right in the ocean. Okay? No plumbing. I saw one schematic in one book that I had read that showed dotted lines with a little house that would go over the ocean. And up along that dotted line, it said sewer line, but I don't believe it for a bit. And they were also told your refuge and your garbage, just leave it along the shoreline and the high tide will come in and take it away. So if everybody steps this way, turns right around and looks at that picture way in the back. Okay? 1935 Labor Day hurricane, category 5. Largest drop in barometric pressure recorded. All right, now this picture is a little bit deceiving, okay, and I'll tell you why. This train wreck was not carrying passengers because remember how I told you by that time the railroad started to shut down and limp along? Okay, think back also in civics class when you were in high school or even in college. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal, designed to put World War I vets back to work during the Depression. So they had government-sponsored projects and jobs and agencies to employ our World War I vets. One of them was to create our interstate system in our country. So there was 600 vets down in Isla Mirada working on those roads up above, all right? So the people in Miami saw the barometer going down, and said, oh my gosh, we have got to save these vets down there. You know, they're going to be washed out to sea. So they finally got a train down there. Red tape, bureaucracy, debris in the rails. Finally got down there. 300 of the 600 men got in the train. And this is me ad-libbing a little bit. I'm thinking that they were probably saying things like, oh, thank the Lord, we're in the train, we're going to get home, we're going to be saved, all right? An 18-foot wall of water crashes over the train, knocks it off the tracks, and that's the result there. All 600 vets perished. Okay? They were either washed out to sea or found dead in the mangroves. Now, this is a very poignant, significant event in Key's history. Okay, first of all, it could have been prevented if the train had gotten down there without all the foolishness that delayed it. All right, so it means a lot to Key's residents. It happened in 35. Down at the end of the old 7 Mile is Veterans Beach. There's also the memorial that's in Isla Mirada where this took place. It happened. There's a high water line and just a memorial dedicated to those 600 veterans. All right, and that was the end of the FEC. Okay, so that just about concludes my talk and my tour. But there's one more thing underneath my name tag. 2 Spanish words, Cayo Paloma. All right, it's not my last name, and it's not my hometown, which you'll see on some name badges here. Cayo Paloma. The year is 1513. This area is being explored by early Spanish explorers. They came upon this island in the Florida Straits here, and they were in search of a food source and a water source. Obviously, they found no water source, but they did find a food source in the white-crowned pigeon. All right, so that bird happens to be protected in Florida now because the population was just about wiped out. But in the old Spanish navigation charts, this little island is labeled Cayo Paloma, which transcribes to Pigeon Key. Okay, so that's how we get our name, Pigeon Key. Okay, but I hope you enjoyed the tour. I enjoyed your attentiveness, and I appreciate it. And I'm going to go down to the water and start tossing out food. But take your time. I won't start until I see the majority of you guys here. And if you're interested in the museum, this portion of the museum is dedicated to the people who lived on Pigeon Key. This portion is dedicated to actually how the bridges were built, which is fascinating too. We might not be able to keep that door open. But anyway, thanks again. I'll see you in a few minutes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys. Hello.
The locomotive and the coal car did not get moved. Amazing breeze coming through here. showing how the bridges were made. Some of the equipment to maintain the railroads. Ship navigation. Some more navigation. Two different styles of bridges they have down here.
Look at this trendy looking train.
The Havana Special. Some of the details, length of different bridges. Oi, oi, going to feed the fish. Looks like maybe some more signals. Now we're going to go check out the fish feeding that they've trained very well over the years to all come get the free food. She's got a lot of great information in her storytelling. More storytelling about the shipwrecking and all that good stuff. That's why all the houses in the Keys are so tall. The taller they were, the better chance you had of seeing the ships wreck into the reefs, and the first person to see it got 50% of the rights. And sometimes they actually move the entire houses down there to get better visuals. Wonderful breeze down here today. And each one of the columns that held up the bridge was one of those schooners. I believe they brought all their equipment from Spain. Special concrete they developed, mixed it with salt water, and as we've seen, well over 100 years, and all the bridges are still standing through all of the hurricanes. Just as these old houses that were built in all over 100 years ago, mostly, all still standing with no issues other than wear and tear. But they're more realistic with the weather expectations. You got a storm, open the windows, let the wind pass through. Got some snapper and some tarpon.
Now there's also a bonnethead shark in the tank. It's a member of the hammerhead family. And you see him every once in a while. Look, that one's right there. There's a shark right here.
Going to a different location here. Just had the nurse shark swim by. Supposedly the nurse shark and a bonnethead shark are also in here. Ah, there's the bonnethead. Bonnethead's maybe 2 feet. The Snapper of all little by little found where the free food is at and loving their life. The sharks definitely can't come and go. They got the gate closed. Some big jacks, tarpon. Oh yes, little tarpon. Tarpon's about 3 feet maybe. Jacks are about 2 feet. Can't imagine this water's much more clear when it's not windy. So that's it for our tour of Pigeon Key. I highly encourage you to come down if you got interest in the history of the Keys. Just a 2-mile walk or trolley ride on a imitation train brings you to this island. What do we need? Money?
I need money.
Oh,
I'm gonna
now she takes all my money. Be careful.
I'm gonna be in the where the food is.
Oh, she's going to get the food. Before we leave you, let's go check out the souvenir shop and food shop. But they do a lot of great stuff here for kids on summertime, and look at some junior ocean research. It's amazing. This place here was 1908. And it was 4 of these, I think she said. Held 65 people apiece. The rest of this area was all canvas tents. There were no bathrooms. You had a partially exposed like outhouse right along the coastline. 400 people coming through this area here daily while they're doing construction. Once it was all done, you had a team of painters. They were in charge of maintaining 7 Mile Bridge and Bahia Honda Bridge. So the island's open until 4. They open at 9 a.m. You can either take the trolley in. Was there a charge for the trolley? Was there a charge for the trolley?
Yes. It's the tour on the trolley is $28.
So $28 to take the trolley across.
But you
I
can
did
do
not.
it.
You can
You
walk.
can do it walking and probably it's less than that.
Yes, there's going to be. When you come down the bridge, there is a place to pay to get onto this little island. Not sure we're going to call it food. Snacks. Souvenirs and snacks. Yeah?
There's food.
Oh, there is food.
Snacks. Of course there is. All right, Mommy.
Oreos and crackers and
I can live on this
Nutri-Grain
for a
bars.
weekend, for sure.
maybe a month or two.
I can live on Oreos, peanut butter, wafers, and Nature Body crunchy bits.
And by all means, much better conditions than it was 100 years ago. Much better conditions than 100 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. We got air conditioning there. What, Mommy? I will walk through. See.
That was their celebration of getting Flagler
Yeah,
to
no worry.
Key West.
Yeah, that's the book that you gifted me.
The Last Train to Paradise. Yes, that was a great book.
That's a good book.
Somehow I timed it just right, and I did an audiobook, and it was talking on the trip as I was hitting each key.
Oh, wow.
Going through the
That
stretch
has
there.
been amazing.
Yeah, it was a coincidence, but it worked out perfect, like all the way down to Whale Harbor.
Wow.
Talking about us being stuck in the traffic and having the boat parades and stuff of modern day, and realizing why all the trenches are on the side of the US 1. Really, really cool. Oh, she found a good sign.
That's pretty. Beautiful message. That's the most important.
Nice little shop. Great little shop. Great little attitude from the people who kind of live and work here. So if you all joined last week's live, we were doing the beach walk on the negative low tide. Found that one hermit crab in an orange shell, which is a horse conch. This is how big that shell will get. That's a great find for people who are into shells. In the back of your queen conchs. I'm not sure what that one is. Never really seen that one here. These are the sea biscuits. It's like a sea urchin with very small spines. Over here is where they had the mess halls, the kitchens of the day. I think they're still doing a kitchen area for the visitors. Let's see the tent area where they have the group meetings to discuss their finds of the day. The area that we're at where the fish feeding, the covering there, we had the original talk of what the island's about, is all solar panels help them have constant power out here. So we're going to do a little bit of exploring ourselves now before we catch our train back. We greatly appreciate everybody joining in, doing the whole likes and shares and subscribing deal. Greatly appreciated. If we continue to grow this channel, we'll explore more places. Always let us know on where you might want us to go check out for you. We'll see what we can do to do that. So until next time, we appreciate it. And Messi, if you're watching again, I hope the gaming goes well. We'll talk to you.